You ever stop to think that the bravest person you know might have gone through the worst horrors in life and still looks normal? Beverly Marsh is exactly that paradox. A fragile girl in the eyes of the world, but one who carries inside her a strength capable of facing the impossible. What few people realize is that every trauma, every fear she felt in childhood did not break her. On the contrary, it transformed her into someone able to see the future and face terror head-on. Today, you are going to discover how abuse, bullying, and near death did not destroy her, but gave her powers no one else has. And if you think courage is born from ease, Beverly is going to prove the opposite. If you are a fan of cinema, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss any video. But first, comment below which character you want me to analyze here on the channel. Now, let us go to the video. Beverly is that kind of character who arrives quietly, almost shy, but when you realize it, she has already become the emotional heart of the story. She carries that air of a girl who learned too soon to take care of herself, and that always touches us. You know, when someone speaks softly but their life screams, that is her. Derry looks at Beverly with that mix of judgment and mystery, as if the whole town were trying to decide who she is without asking anything. And that already says a lot about the emotional ground where she was raised. Those who follow her journey quickly realize that Beverly is the kind of person who lives in a fragile balance between strength and vulnerability. She is like that friend you see laughing at parties, but no, there is a storm hidden inside. She joined the Losers Club from the sidelines, but ended up becoming a point of unity among them. Her presence brings that feeling of someone here understands the weight of things, and that creates very deep connections with those who watch. The most curious thing is that even being so young, Beverly already carries a survival behavior that many people only develop around 30. She reads the environment, avoids unnecessary noise, and chooses carefully where to step, like someone who learned that one wrong step can cost dearly. Have you ever noticed how some people arrive in life with that fine, almost intuitive sensitivity? Beverly is exactly that kind of soul. And that makes it clear there is a heavy story behind her. In the group she works as, that spark that lights up when everything seems dark. She has a slightly rebellious, slightly sweet way that makes everyone lower their guard. And it is funny how that matches the tone of the movie, because while the others deal with their own monsters, Beverly becomes a silent reminder that courage is not the absence of fear, but a response to it. It is as if she said without opening her mouth, "It will hurt, but we keep going." And even so, you can see that she tries not to draw too much attention. It is like someone who learned to live along the edges, not to awaken problems. The way she moves, speaks, and observes everything around shows that her story was written through caution. That kind of behavior always brings the feeling that there is more hidden there. You look at her and feel that the layers have not even started to be revealed. She also arrives with that energy of someone carrying a secret that cannot be spoken out loud, and that stirs the viewer because, let us face it, everyone has gone through that phase of keeping pains that no one sees. Beverly becomes an emotional mirror for those who grew up hearing that it is exaggeration or that it is not that serious. The identification appears there, sneaky, almost automatic. And it is impossible not to feel the urge to understand what really happens in her house. Even so, Beverly is not defined by suffering. There is in her a persistent brightness that reminds us of those people who, even surrounded by shadow, find small points of light, and that gives the character huge humanity. She laughs, jokes, creates bonds, and allows herself to feel even with a heart full of scars. That mix of firmness and fragility is what makes her someone we follow so closely. And of course, it is exactly that emotional route full of cracks that prepares the ground for what comes ahead. Her story does not begin with Pennywise. It begins long before, in that silent house where her fears learned to walk alone. But to understand how everything unfolds, we need to look closely at what comes right after. And then when we dive into that next piece, we can see where the chaos inside her really began. Internal conflicts and traumas, childhood marked by domestic fear. Beverly's childhood has that kind of silence that is not peace, it is tension. She grows up walking on eggshells inside her own house, as if every door opening could mean a new problem. It is an environment where fear does not need screams. It settles in the look, in the gestures, and in pauses that are too long. Some children learn to play early. She learned to protect herself, and that shapes the way she sees the world, always with one foot back. When home is not a safe place, the child becomes a specialist in anticipating danger. Beverly notices everything: the sound of footsteps, the tone of voice, the heavy breathing. She becomes almost an emotional radar, capturing small changes other children would never notice. And those who grew up like that know how it works. You start reading people before they even speak because your survival depends on it. That kind of childhood makes a person develop an automatic reflex of containment, like someone who hides even their own smile not to bother anyone. Beverly tries to be light, tries to be small, tries to fit in the space without awakening anything bad. And it is hard to notice that when she is with her friends, we see flashes of the child she could have been. It is like for the first time she breathes without fear of making noise. And the strongest thing of all is that she grows up believing that the world works like that. Based on permanent vigilance, when someone lives with fear inside their home, they learn to live as if always about to face something. That creates an internal tension that cannot be turned off. And Beverly carries that into life even when she tries to pretend everything is fine. That dynamic makes her develop an early maturity skill, but also charges a heavy emotional price. Children who grow up in fear often become adults who doubt their own safety, even in the calmest environments. It is as if the whole body had memories of alert, and in her case, that explains both the way she behaves and the impressive strength she shows later. An interesting detail is how she learns to recognize fear even before feeling it. It is almost intuitive, and that shows even when Pennywise tries to attack her later. She perceives nuances, omens, shadows. It is as if supernatural terror were an exaggerated version of the daily terror that was already part of her routine. And when the extraordinary meets the habitual, the impact is always deeper. Paragraph 7. At the same time, the fear that comes from inside the home creates a very real contradiction. The person wants to run but cannot, wants to speak but has no one to, wants to ask for help but does not know if anyone will believe. Beverly lives that emotional prison in silence. And every time the movie gives a close-up on her eyes, you can feel that mix of courage and weakness that only those who lived it know. And it is exactly in that unstable ground that her biggest wound is born, the one that will shape all the rest of her story. Because when danger lives in your house, any other kind of fear learns to feed from that root. And from here we start to understand what really happens between her and the figure that should protect her. The abuse and family trauma of Beverly Marsh. Beverly grew up under the weight of a home that, more than protection, was a source of fear. The father, an authoritarian and violent figure, turned simple moments into unbearable tensions. Domestic violence shaped in her a constant vigilance, as if she were always ready to defend herself, even without knowing from whom. Who has never felt that sensation of walking on eggshells, not knowing if you will step on safe ground or on glass? It is like living in continuous suspense where the villain is inside the house. That experience made her develop a sharp perception of people's intentions, almost like an emotional radar. Beverly learns early that words and gestures can hide storms, and that trusting blindly can hurt. It is the kind of learning no one wants, but that ends up shaping resilience. You know when you meet someone new and already feel that instinctive distrust? She lives that all the time, and that influences every choice. Family pressure also created in her an intense need for validation and acceptance. Growing up feeling inferior, constantly criticized, creates invisible wounds that only heal with external recognition. It is the constant search for belonging, trying to fill a void no one should feel so early. How many people have tried to be perfect to please others and ended up forgetting themselves? Beverly is almost the personification of that. Family trauma also generated in her feelings of guilt and self-blame. She learned to take responsibility for what was out of her control, an emotional survival mechanism. If something went wrong, it was her fault, even if the real guilt was someone else's. Who has never caught themselves thinking, if I had done it differently, this would not have happened? In Beverly's case, that shaped future choices, relationships, and even her courage in the face of danger. Those deep wounds left marks on her self-esteem and on how she relates to the world. She learned that hiding and keeping quiet was a protection strategy, even if it made her feel invisible. But curiously, that same strategy helped her develop empathy and sensitivity, making her more perceptive to others' pain. You know that friend who seems to feel everything with you. Beverly carries some of that directly from her own pain. Pennywise, as you can imagine, perceived those vulnerabilities as if he had a detailed map of Beverly's mind. He knows exactly where to press: fear, insecurity, guilt, shame. Each family trauma becomes a weapon, and he frightens her, showing her own pains reflected in monstrous forms. It is as if he said, "Look again at what you most fear in yourself." Who has never felt that fear is almost tangible, taking over every corner of the mind? And it is precisely that closeness to death and extreme terror that awakens in her something special, a capacity to see beyond, almost like a sixth sense. When Beverly almost dies at Pennywise's hands, something changes. It is as if the threshold between life and death had opened a window to the future. She begins to perceive possibilities and dangers, intuitively acquiring a sensitivity few have born from trauma, fear, and survival. Finally, all that emotional baggage turns into strength, even if painful. Beverly learns to face not only external monsters, but the internal ones she carried since childhood. Every memory of abuse, every contained scream, every hidden tear shapes choices and courage. It is a cycle where trauma becomes learning and defense. And it is exactly that strength that makes us think, how can someone with so much fear still challenge the impossible? Bullying in childhood and Beverly's sense of social exclusion. Beverly never had an easy childhood, and part of that came from school, where bullying became routine. Children can be cruel without realizing it, and for someone already fragile, each harsh word is like a stone on the chest. She felt she never fit in, that she was different, weird, and that no one really understood her. Whoever has felt excluded knows how each look can weigh tons, turning space into an emotional minefield. It is in that environment that Beverly learns to defend herself, but in a silent way. The psychological violence from classmates reinforced insecurities she already carried from home. Every mean comment seemed to confirm that something was wrong with her, as if each criticism were a broken mirror showing her imperfection. It is that feeling of always being one step behind, trying to please, but never being enough. How many people at some point in life have felt like that at school or work? Beverly, however, turns that into attention to detail and perception of others. Bullying also awakened in her a sharp sensitivity to injustice. When you are a constant target, you start to notice immediately when someone else is suffering because you recognize that pain as your own. That intense empathy is a double-edged sword. It brings her closer to people, but also hurts each time she witnesses someone else's pain. It is as if she carried an emotional antenna, always on, ready to pick up any sign of discomfort or fear. At the same time, the need to protect herself created a cautious and distrustful behavior. Beverly learns to measure each step, each word, so as not to become a target again. That self-preservation mechanism shapes her silent courage, because facing internal or external monsters requires courage, but also strategy. Who has never had to calculate every action to avoid problems? She lives that every day, and that makes her resilient. The friends from the Losers Club appear as a safe harbor amid the chaos. With them, Beverly finds validation, belonging, and acceptance, something she desperately sought at home and school. It is the power of the group. When you find people who see who you really are, that sense of exclusion begins to fade. For Beverly, those bonds are essential to face the world outside, but also to face her own fears. Even with friendship, the traumas from bullying leave lasting scars. The fear of rejection persists, and she carries with her the memory of each insult, each look of judgment. But curiously, those memories strengthen her determination not to be defined by what others think. You know that feeling of using the past as a springboard instead of an anchor? That is exactly what Beverly begins to practice unconsciously. Pennywise takes advantage of that vulnerability as if he had a detailed manual of Beverly's mind. He personifies the fears that came from bullying, showing monsters that represent humiliation, rejection, and abandonment. Each attack is almost ritualistic, as if he said, "I will remind you of what you most fear in yourself." It is frightening because he turns psychological traumas into physical manifestations that seem impossible to escape. But it is exactly by facing those horrors that Beverly begins to turn fear into intuition. Each encounter with Pennywise, each painful memory he evokes, forces her to perceive patterns and anticipate moves. That mix of trauma and courage shapes her personality, making her resilient, smart, and intuitive. It is a painful but fascinating process and leaves us thinking, how can fear become an unexpected ally in life? The struggle for independence and identity of Beverly. Beverly has always felt she needed to prove something, both to herself and to the world. Growing up in an abusive environment and facing bullying made her seek her own voice and identity that was hers alone. It is that feeling of wanting to break free from others' expectations and finally say, "I am me," period. Who has never gone through that, trying to assert themselves even when everyone around doubts you? For Beverly, that struggle is daily and silent, but intense. From an early age, she realizes that her appearance and behavior are constantly judged, which reinforces the need to assert herself. Each choice, each word becomes an act of rebellion, a step toward autonomy. Dressing how she wants, choosing her friends, expressing feelings without fear, small revolutions that seem simple but carry enormous weight. It is like learning to walk toward freedom one step at a time without looking back. The search for independence also forces her to face her own fears. Beverly knows that courage is not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Each decision, whether facing Pennywise or confronting her father, is a test of her inner strength. Who has never had to throw themselves into the unknown with their heart racing? That process shapes her, making her more self-confident and aware of who she really is. At the same time, the need to be independent creates internal conflicts. She wants to move away from the figures who hurt her, but the guilt and fear of losing family affection weigh heavily. That dilemma is common for those seeking autonomy, the desire for freedom versus the emotional ties that hold us. Beverly navigates that tension with rare sensitivity, trying to balance courage with the emotional care she still feels. Pennywise perceives that struggle and uses it to manipulate her fear. He explores her desire for freedom, creating situations that test her identity and her courage. Each illusion is a mirror of her own inner struggle, showing that being strong means facing traumas no one else sees. It is frightening, but also an opportunity for self-discovery. Who has never felt that by facing your fears, you discover strengths you never imagined you had? The friendship with the others from the Losers Club becomes fundamental in that process. They are mirrors and anchors, allowing Beverly to explore her independence without feeling completely alone. It is curious how the right support can amplify someone's courage, even in extreme situations. For Beverly, those bonds show that independence does not mean isolation, but the ability to choose with whom to share life. This journey of personal affirmation also teaches her about boundaries and self-respect. She learns that saying no is not rude, but essential to maintaining her emotional integrity. Every act of autonomy strengthens her self-esteem, reducing the power that fears and traumas hold over her. It is like building an invisible shield, capable of protecting her while she faces the horrors of the world and of her own past. And, in the end, this entire search for identity prepares Beverly to confront the final enemy. Her emotional independence and courage are powerful weapons against Pennywise, but also against everything that society and her own childhood tried to impose. Every challenge faced, every fear confronted, shapes her as a person and a heroine. And it makes us wonder, could true strength come more from within than from outside? Pennywise and how he exploits Beverly's fears. Pennywise is not just a scary clown. He is a master at reading Beverly's mind. He knows exactly where to press, which memories and insecurities will make her heart race. For him, each fear is not only a reflection of childhood, but a powerful weapon to paralyze. It is as if he had a manual of the soul, pointing to every emotional scar she carries. Who has never felt that someone seemed to see straight into their most intimate vulnerabilities? He turns traumas into concrete monsters. The memories of abuse, bullying, and rejection take form and become tangible threats. A dark hallway, a fallen doll, a moving shadow. Everything serves to awaken the terror Beverly already feels inside. It is frightening because the fear is already there, ready, just waiting to be amplified. Pennywise only needs to blow on the embers she carries within herself. The clown also manipulates the feeling of powerlessness that Beverly feels in the face of the adult world. He creates impossible situations, making her question whether she will ever be able to protect herself. Each illusion is a cruel test, showing that physical strength or strategy alone are not enough to survive. Who has never felt that life seemed to throw impossible obstacles at you just to see if you can endure? Beverly faces that every day, but in a literal and supernatural way. He explores the fear of rejection and abandonment in an almost artistic manner. The feeling of being isolated or invisible is reflected in scenes where she feels alone and surrounded by danger. Pennywise does not need to scream. He He simply highlights feelings Beverly already knows well, and that is scarier than any monster jumping out of the darkness. It is the kind of terror that makes you freeze, not because of its form, but because of the truth behind it. The clown also plays with the fear of failure and of disappointing those she loves. Each test of courage becomes pressure to prove that she is not weak, that she deserves her friend's trust. He turns each internal doubt into a monster that seems to whisper, "You can't," who has never felt the anxiety of not meeting expectations. For Beverly, this is literal, tangible, and deadly. Despite everything, facing Pennywise awakens in her abilities and senses that would be impossible to develop otherwise. Each confrontation forces her to stay alert, read subtle signs, and anticipate danger. It is as if every trauma, every amplified fear, trains her to see the future in small clues. This intuitive ability becomes a vital weapon, transforming fear into sharp perception. He also shows that terror is not only external, but internal. By facing Pennywise, Beverly confronts her own demons, those she tried to ignore or hide for years. Each manifested fear is an opportunity for self-knowledge, even if a painful one. It is like looking in the mirror and seeing your own fragility, but also your strength emerging from the shadows. And it is exactly this duality that makes the relationship between Beverly and Pennywise so complex. He is the antagonist who challenges, frightens, and tests, but also the catalyst that awakens her inner power. Each encounter leaves marks, but also reveals capabilities she never imagined having. And it makes us wonder, could it be that sometimes the greatest fear is the most direct path to discovering who we really are? The near-death experience and Beverly's awakening of intuition and foresight. When Beverly almost dies at Pennywise's hands, something changes inside her. It is as if the line between life and death had narrowed, opening space to perceive things that were once invisible. She feels the world in a different, more intense way, as if every detail carries meaning. Who has never felt that after an extreme experience, you begin to see life through new eyes? For Beverly, that perception is literal and almost supernatural. This traumatic experience awakens in her a powerful intuition. Small signs, gestures, words, or movements become indicators she can read almost instinctively. It is as if each future danger reveals itself in subtle flashes, and she learns to interpret those signals quickly. Who has ever had that gut feeling you cannot explain understands how valuable this ability is. The closeness to death also reinforces her courage. Beverly realizes that facing the impossible is not a choice, but a necessity. Each risky decision becomes guided not only by fear, but by this sharp perception that almost works as a danger radar. It is fascinating to see how extreme trauma can transform vulnerability into strength in an almost alchemical way. This new sensitivity directly influences how she relates to others. Beverly begins to perceive hidden emotions and intentions, anticipating conflicts or recognizing fears no one verbalizes. It is as if she developed a social and emotional sixth sense, capable of guiding her actions and protecting her friends. Who has never wished to have that kind of intuition to avoid problems? For her, it is real. Moreover, this experience connects her more deeply with the world around her. Sounds, smells, shadows, and even silence become information she can decipher. Death almost touched her life, and that makes her value every detail, every moment, making her more observant and strategic. It is the kind of learning that only comes from limit situations, which leave scars but also clarity. Pennywise, of course, tries to use this new sensitivity against her, showing her scenarios that test her perception and self-control. But the difference now is that Beverly is no longer the same. She can distinguish illusion from reality much faster. It is a game of emotional intelligence and survival, where every insight counts and every decision is crucial. Who has never felt that after a great trauma, you develop skills that once seemed impossible? This perception of the future is not exact, but it works as a compass. Beverly can anticipate risks, protect her friends, and plan moves before being caught by surprise. Every near-death experience taught her something that becomes an advantage. It is the idea that sometimes what seemed like the worst experience of your life becomes your greatest school of survival. And in the end, this intuition and sharp perception prepare her to face ever greater challenges. Beverly not only survived terror, but began to understand the power that comes from fear and extreme vulnerability. It is a painful but extraordinary process that makes us think, could every deep trauma carry within it a hidden gift? After everything she faced, Beverly emerges not only as a survivor but as a true heroine. Every trauma, every fear, every near-death experience contributed to shaping her inner strength. She is not invincible, but she learned to turn vulnerability into courage. Who has never realized that facing difficulties brings forth a stronger version of yourself? For Beverly, this is literal, visible in every action she takes. Abuse, bullying, and rejection become fuel for her determination. She understands that she cannot control the world, but she can control how she reacts to it. Every challenge is an opportunity to prove to herself that she is capable. It is like learning to dance in the rain instead of waiting for the sun. This capacity for resilience sets her apart and prepares her for any confrontation, internal or external. Her emotional independence and newfound intuition work as powerful tools. Beverly can make quick decisions, sense threats, and protect those she loves. It is the kind of silent strength that impresses but also inspires. Who has never wished for that clarity to face daily problems? For her, these abilities were born from pain, but now they are her greatest asset. Pennywise, who once seemed invincible, now finds an adversary capable of facing her own fears. Each illusion, each psychological trick, is faced with courage and strategy. It is as if she learned to play the clown's own game, using emotional intelligence as a shield. The fight stops being only about survival and becomes about psychological triumph. Even with so much strength, Beverly keeps her humanity. She feels, suffers, cries, but never lets it paralyze her. It is the combination of sensitivity and courage that makes her whole. Anyone who has ever seen someone balance emotion and determination knows how rare and impressive that is. This ability to feel deeply without losing strength is what makes her the protagonist of her own story. Her relationship with the members of the Losers Club becomes even more valuable. They are not just allies, but reflections of trust, courage, and mutual support. Together, they show that facing internal and external monsters is possible, but no one needs to go through it alone. For Beverly, this support network is part of what makes her invincible, even in the face of absolute terror. Her transformation is also symbolic, from a cornered girl to a woman who faces her worst nightmares head-on. Every trauma lived, every fear overcome, every loss endured contributes to that evolution. It is like watching a butterfly emerge from a cocoon made of pain and courage. And it reminds us that the true heroine is not born from easy victories, but from intense, difficult battles. And, in the end, Beverly becomes an example of inner strength that goes beyond fiction. She shows us that it is possible to face our own monsters, understand the power of fear, and turn suffering into courage. Every painful experience becomes learning, and every lesson becomes power. And it makes us wonder, if Beverly could do it, what part of our own courage is still waiting to awaken? And so we see how Beverly Marsh is not just a victim of fear, but a heroine shaped by it. Every trauma, every challenge, every near-death experience was transformed into strength, intuition, and courage. And you, while watching her story, begin to realize, how many fears do you face every day that could be transformed into power? Tell us in the comments, which character do you want us to analyze in the next video? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to keep learning about courage, fear, and transformation with us.